From Boca Raton, Florida, Rabbis Efrem Goldberg, Philip Moskowitz, and Josh Broide are taking you behind the Bima. The BRS rabbis schmooze about contemporary issues and talk to special guests who give a behind-the-scenes look at how they got to where they are and what keeps them going. Welcome to Behind the Bima.
Good evening. It is Wednesday night, 9 p.m. I'm Rabbi Efrem Goldberg, joined by my friend and colleague, Rabbi Josh Broide. We are here to take you
behind the Bima.
Behind the Bima. We have been off for a few weeks, and we are so glad and grateful to be back together, and to be back together with you, and to be bringing you a good friend and a great guest tonight. We got a great show, and we're excited to be back behind the Bima. First of all, let's begin as we always do with our attitude of gratitude, thanking our generous sponsors, Maryland Jeremy Strauss, in commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Mr. Michael Strauss, Olav Shalom. Strausses have become very good friends. They're really incredible people, visionaries, philanthropists, and hard workers, great people, community-minded. And tonight is also co-sponsored by another dear friend who had to do it. This pains me. You remember we had a guest recently who behaved much better than anyone anticipated. We had him on at the end of our marathon when it was the morning of Israel.
Yeah.
We had been on for like 3.5 hours. We thought it was safe. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning in America. We figured it was safe, and he behaved really well. We were proud of him. Anyway, he played tennis this week with someone, and he won. By Seth Grossman defeated Yitzi Preter. And so Preter had to sponsor tonight in honor of Seth Grossman's surprising stamina on the tennis court. But calling for a rematch. So,
first of all, I love Seth. You know, he's one of those guys which he's always there for you. And I got two great stories. First of all, I would not have had
No. We're not going to.
I can't say that right now. I can't get to Seth Grossman.
We are not making him. When he sponsors, we'll talk about him. We're going to get him to sponsor.
I've got two great stories with Seth.
You got to put him in the bank. When Grossman sponsors, we'll talk about him.
Okay.
But tonight, actually, also want to bring to our audience, whether you're watching live now or later or listening, please take a moment, take out your phone, and do something very significant and meaningful. Not difficult for you, but making a big difference in someone else's life. Esty Moskowitz, our own Rabbi Moskowitz, Beatles and Moskowitz, their daughter Esty, young girl, amazing, beautiful young girl. We know she's been suffering and struggling with illness and undergoing significant treatment. And we began a campaign called the 1-in-1 campaign, $1 a day and a minute a day of learning. $1 a day of stuck, a minute a day of learning. The $1 a day of Tzedakah is in conjunction with our great friend, Dr. Donath of Daily Giving. BRS are not recipients. It's not a ploy, God forbid, for us to take the money, get the money, raise money. It's $1 a day. Daily Giving is an amazing project that gives to a diversified portfolio of worthy tzedakahs around the world. Millions of dollars is giving away simply because people have signed up to give $1 a day. People don't walk around with cash anymore. And you can't Venmo $1 a day. So you sign up for Daily Giving, and it enables you to essentially give $1 a day and to be part of a pool that's diversified Daily Giving. But don't go directly to Daily Giving. Go to brsonline.org/1, the number 1, AND1. You can see it on the screen if you're watching. brsonline.org 1. And there you could sign up for the $1 a day of giving, and it'll take you into a WhatsApp group where you'll get a minute a day of learning, 60 seconds. 60 seconds. It's not called a minute, but it's 5 minutes. It's 1 minute. 1 minute. Rabbis around the world are every day until Esty's all better. And then we'll continue it because people will be learning. But we're not giving up. We're not slowing down. $1 a day and a minute a day. Tzedakah, Torah learning, all in her schos and the merit. Esty should have a complete, speedy, and painless refuah shlema among all those who are ill.
I got to tell you, I was a little skeptical about the $1 a day because I said, what $1 at the end of the day? It's not really that much. And then all of a sudden I signed up and I get these daily emails.
Yeah, it tells you where it's going.
I love, not only to tell you where it's going, but all of a sudden it says, because of you now, it's almost $10,000 that are being given out, $9,800, whatever it is.
Right.
I said, my little dollar, I'm not a dollar. I'm like a macher. I'm giving away $10,000, and it's great organizations. Every day is another organization. I'm like, wow.
It's great stuff. And they're I would call them a partner, but again, BRS is not on the list of recipients. We don't qualify, and we understand that. We're a local effort organization, even though we have global reach with Behind the Bima and our Shirim. But we understand we're not a recipient, and that's what makes this even more sincere and authentic, is that it's not for us.
It's amazing.
Give tzedakah, $1 a day of tzedakah, and a minute a day. Go to brsonline.org/1 and 1. So we've been off for a few weeks. We had Pesach. I don't think we've met since before Pesach. When we had Coach Bruce Pearl. If you didn't listen to Coach Bruce Pearl, go back and listen. He was amazing. He was really fantastic.
Well,
So we've
listen,
been off. Several things have been happening. We had Pesach and Lag BaOmer and some other interruptions, but we're back. We've got guests lined up. We are better than ever, and we're ready to bring to you some insight, inspiration, and to go behind the Bima with us. I'll go behind the Bima, behind
Right.
the Bima for a minute. Should I?
yeah, well, I mean, usually I'm the one that's traveling or something's going on because then all of a sudden one Wednesday night someone's in Israel, another Wednesday night their daughter's getting engaged, another Wednesday night there's something else going on. Like Rabbi Goldberg, this guy, he can't keep up.
Yeah.
Mazel tov, mazel
Well,
tov.
thank you very much. Yes, my daughter Leora got engaged to Hillel Storch, the son of Rabbi Eli and Yafa Storch.
Mazel
Very,
tov.
very excited. It's a beautiful shidduch, and she's an amazing girl. If we say so ourselves, he's a great boy, and we wish all those
He's a very
those who are
tall
looking to
boy.
get married. He's almost 6'4". He definitely helps our basketball team. Very excited.
You should see the
Now-
picture I took with him. he can barely see me in the picture.
It's funny. You've got
Let's see if I
you've
can
got our
find it.
team now. He rounds us out. We've got me and Shai, Mikey and
Yeah.
Kalev, and now Hillel rounds us up. We got our starting five, and we gained some height with our starting five. He brings up our average height, so we're really excited to have him. And we bless everybody who wants to be married, who have children who want to be married. Everybody should be blessed. There we
Look
go.
at that.
Thank you. Amazing. Yeah, we're excited.
He's a big boy. That's great. Do the boys get along with each other? Is that part of the requirement?
Fantastically. Yeah,
Yeah.
they get along great. I tell you, it's really amazing. I have 6 girls and a little boy. Now this, please God, is the third wedding. And I realize it's incredible. I love my sons-in-law. Like, I learn with them, I hang with them, I play sports with them. We have a great time and a great relationship. It's amazing. Someone else took the hard years, raised these boys, put in the time, paid for their schooling. Someone
You
else
get the
put in the
finished
hard
product.
time. And I get them like they're a mensch. I get them
Yeah.
when there's someone you want to hang out with. I get them
Right.
when they're ready to rock and roll and ready to go. So it's amazing. Yeah. Everyone again should be blessed who's waiting, who's longing, who's looking.
Are all the boys different from one another? Do they have different personalities, or they're pretty
Very
similar?
different personalities. The girls have different personalities, but they have
Right.
more in common than they have that separates them. All three are real B'nai Torah. They love learning, but they're also chill and they get it. And they understand family. They understand Klal Yisrael. They're great. They're
Should
all
bring
great
3 boys on.
so
Bring them
far.
on one day.
Believe I and her. Maybe it'd be interesting. They could talk about being a son-in-law of a being a son-in-law
Exactly.
and being a son-in-law of a rabbi. Bring Jake also.
We'll
Bring
bring
your
on
son-in-law.
Jake. That'd be great.
Bring on Jake. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's exciting, and we're grateful and sort of turning around the wedding in some record time. They got
Right.
engaged. When did they get engaged? A couple weeks ago, and the wedding is June 22nd. So
Well, I
basically,
mean,
like
I think you
6
said
weeks
it's
of
either
prep.
you can stress about it for a month, or you can stress about it for a year. What's the big
Well,
deal, right?
here's my theory, and then we'll move on because not everybody wants to hear this or talk about this. But my theory is the following: when it comes to simchas, it takes however long you give yourself to prepare a simcha. Right? There are people, let's call it the secular world, who plan a wedding 3 years from then, and so for the next 3 years, their life is consumed with planning that wedding.
Right.
And then if you give yourself 6 weeks, so you bang out the prep for the wedding in 6 weeks. What do you got to do? You got to line up your hall, your caterer, got to get your music, your flowers. You got to get apparently your gowns. That's not something I worry about.
What do
So
you
I'm
have to
saying
get?
you
Do you
could
need
get
anything? A new
I'm
tie?
just saying you could do it in 3 days.
Right.
Atara, my second daughter, we planned the whole wedding in Florida, and then because of Corona, we pivoted and we moved the wedding to New York and just had to replan the wedding in New York last minute. It takes however long you give yourself. So that was my argument to my wife. I said they could get married, August, September, and there's merit and value to a longer engagement. But basically, that just means you spend the entire summer being tortured and torturing me.
Right.
Or we could make the push, and it'll be a lot more work on the front end. But then we'll have a married couple. We'll have a great summer with them. We'll have a lot of fun. They'll be married, and we'll be ready to go.
You can have a summer vacation.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, that's the plan.
Great.
What's going on with you? Anything new to report?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, that was just 1 week. And then yet another week you were traveling to Israel. You have some big things going on right now with the Yeshiva South Florida. Big announcements.
Yeah, we did some recruiting.
It's
We went
amazing.
to Israel. I went for 3 days, hit 13 yeshivas in 3 days. So it was a pretty exhausting trip. Not really out of my comfort zone, to tell you the truth. I'm a shul rav guy. I'm a shul rabbi. I don't represent yeshiva. I haven't done recruiting. I don't rotate and go speak. I haven't done this circuit before. A little out of my comfort zone. And I get nervous. I get nervous when I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't get nervous getting up, giving a drush or a parsha shir, or speaking at a funeral, or even under a chuppah today. because those are all in my comfort zone. You've done it so many times, you gain a level of comfort with it. But standing up at a yeshiva was out of my comfort zone. But I quickly got the hang of it because it was so many in such a short time, and had a great reception, great reaction, great list of guys who are registered, many more who are still in serious conversation, exploring. So some great response to that, and that was a great trip.
Any excited because of Behind the Bima, and did that play into anyone's?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Everywhere I go, I'll tell you something funny. It wasn't on this trip. It was
like I wasn't thinking about it, but I watched Behind the Bima, so now I'm considering it.
Let's just say you walk through certain neighborhoods, or maybe the largest yeshiva in Israel or in the world, and guys stop and go, "Oh, I love Behind the Bima." Like
and you're like, really?
It's a fascinating.
I didn't know you had the internet. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very interesting group that attracted to or listened to Behind the Bima, which really takes us behind the Bima, about Behind the Bima, because we took off these weeks. There was conflicts, and then the question was, do we go back? Was it a fun ride? Do you go out when you're feeling good about it, or do you get back to the grind of the guests and making the time and so on? And we debated. We're down one of our hosts who is focused, understandably and correctly, with his family, top priority for anybody. So maybe it was time to hang him up. Maybe time to take a break. The truth is, when we began this, there were other people in this space, but we filled that space pretty well during Corona. People were locked down, quarantined, at home, distant, disconnected, bored. So they knew Wednesday nights, 9:00. If you want, you could pour a glass of wine or beer or a tall cup of seltzer, and you could listen to three rabbis kibitz about nothing and have a guest on. But now I feel like everybody's doing this podcast. They just have different names for it, but the podcast where you interview people, that's like everybody's doing it.
Right.
So do we need to? Maybe we should pivot and do something different. Maybe we should focus on what we're doing. Maybe there are other priorities in the community or other ambitions that we want to achieve. So we had a big discussion about, we went, so Behind the Bima and Behind the Bima is that we're not sure how long to do Behind the Bima, and what the future should be of Behind the Bima, because we enjoy it. We enjoy the guests, but then, our guest tonight, I think this conversation gets us going and got us excited again of the conversations we're having, and the difference we're trying to make, and why we're doing it, and the feedback we get from it. So it's pretty exciting. We're going to stick with it.
We're going to keep going.
I
just like it, so I get to talk to you. It's just a fun opportunity for me.
Yeah. So we are, we're having a good time with it. Esther Tila Bas Ariel Tzipora. For those who want to daven for her, Esther Tila Bas Ariel Tzipora B'soch Shar Chol Yisrael. Among all those who are ill, we long for their healing. I'll tell you one other thing that happened during this time off, and then we'll bring on our good friend, Rabbi with 1B, Mark Wildes. Our professional who helps us with these overlays is enduring a pinched nerve. I think the medicine that he's on, we've had some misspellings recently.
I think that's rabbi in like Spanish or something.
But he gets, we give him a break. We're cutting him some slack. What's the big deal? You misspelled the word rabbi. It's not a big deal. But anyway, I came back, and one of the things I did was NCSY summer programs. How many kids do you think NCSY is bringing in NCSY summer programs to Israel?
I used to run the TJJ program, back in the day.
I remember that.
Right.
So how many?
I would say today, I'm going to say 2,500.
2,400. They're 2,500 approximately.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
It's huge. There's no one else doing that.
They do a staff retreat, a staff Shabbos, with all their madrichim, all of their staff, counselors, program managers, everybody. So Yocheved and I went to the staff Shabbaton, over 600 young people in a room. And the energy, Rabbi Broide, was unreal.
Amazing, right?
The energy, the enthusiasm. And I really felt so inspired, not just by the beautiful davening and the zmiros and the energy, but talking to these young people. Because in that room were young people in a world which is all about pursuing your happiness, your pleasure, what you want to do, what makes you happy, what's in it for me. These young people are taking achrayas, they're taking responsibility for the continuity of the Jewish people.
And most
they're
of them
running TJJ buses.
They're not getting paid. Right?
They're running chesed. They don't get paid.
They're not getting paid. Right.
No, they don't get paid. And the truth is, it wasn't just in that room where that energy and that commitment and that devotion and that selflessness, and to be among young people taking responsibility for the Jewish people, taking responsibility for Jewish continuity. The whole theme of the weekend was just over and over again how this has to be not only the best summer ever, but the most transformative summer ever. And what are you going to do? And how are you going to stay in touch with your campers? How are you going to inspire them? How are you going to uplift them? How are you going to speak to them on their level? What's your goal for them? How do you measure success for them? Counselors in any camp are amazing and selfless. Often they do it because they're paid. And in many settings, the measure is, did they have fun? And the truth is, in all the Jewish camps, there's a lot of growth that goes on, not only NCSY summer program. So I want to give props and praise to counselors and leaders in every summer program. We're using it as a platform to inspire. But there was something special about this. Over 600 young people taking achrayus, responsibility for the Jewish future, for Jewish continuity, for public school Jewish children, and for learning of all level, and for all backgrounds, and for special needs, and for sports, and for every type of summer program. But they also share the same goal, which is inspiring. And then you and I were at an event on Sunday night here in Boca, first ever an annual event for HASC. And again, you see that video and HASC and the counselors taking achrayus, responsibility, selflessness, putting others before yourself. You have, did Ayala work at HASC?
Ayala met Jake in HASC.
That's
how I knew he was a great guy. Any guy that's working in HASC has got to be a great guy.
That's right. And that's what I said that night, is that HASC is producing the best husbands and wives and mothers and fathers. Anyway, I was very inspired to be around these young people.
And just so you know, Simone reminded me that Yocheved and her, Yocheved apparently sent her a picture when they were both color war captains.
Right.
I asked her who won. She didn't say.
Oh, you might not have been there, but the other
I heard
captain
I heard about
spoke that night.
He did.
Past guest on Behind the Bima.
That's right.
And he mentioned being a color war captain. He spoke magnificently.
Yeah.
Rabbi Gibber told his story of being a public school kid from Pittsburgh and finding his Judaism in Camp HASC. And I was crying. Really, really. We got to bring him back on Behind the Bima to tell that story, because one of these other podcasts are going to swallow him up. So we got a great guest tonight. Rabbi Mark Wildes, he's a real friend, a longtime friend. Rabbi Wildes actually went to law school and practiced law before he pivoted into outreach, and we'll ask him about that and learn more about his personal story. He's written 2 books that are very popular. He's a great speaker. He describes himself as the millennials rabbi running the Manhattan Jewish Experience, otherwise known affectionately as MJE, Manhattan Jewish Experience.
Not to be confused with the Boca Raton Jewish Experience. Correct.
MJE, Manhattan Jewish Experience, lighting Manhattan on fire, doing amazing outreach, and really change that you can measure, doing really, really great things. And it's a long time coming. We've been talking, and we're happy to finally get him on. So this is a conversation worth listening to, and we think worth sharing with others, because we hope it'll challenge all of us about our role in outreach and in-reach and why it matters and the difference we can all be making. So without any further ado, Rabbi Mark Wildes. We are joined behind the Bima, frankly, long overdue, by our good friend. We actually are good friends, not just saying good friends. Rabbi Mark Wildes, the founder, the director of MJE, the Manhattan Jewish Experience, lighting Manhattan and the tri-state area on fire with a love of all Jews, changing lives, doing great things. One of those good-looking rabbis who still has his hair flowing and blonde, a source of envy. You'll have to tell us the secret one of these days. Rabbi Wildes, thank you for joining us.
My hair and I are very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are excited to go behind the Bima and learn more about not only your life, but to talk about subject that's really important. We're honored. Rabbi Broide is the outreach rabbi at the Boca Raton Synagogue. We don't know how many Orthodox shuls actually have in their budget or on their staff designated outreach rabbis who are concerned and care about and connect with and engage the entire community. It's a great point of pride of our community. And a lot of what he's done, what we do, is inspired by your work at MJE, BJE, BRJE.
Including the name. We said when we're picking out a name, we're like, well, what should we call this outreach program? So we, look at the best Manhattan Jewish Experience.
Talk to us how'd you get involved in outreach? When you were growing up, did you see yourself
before I do that, just a legal matter to get out of the way. We will have our attorneys calling you because of trademark issues, but I guess flattery is the best form. What is it? Imitation, best form of flattery.
Absolutely.
Manhattan Jewish Experience. And I want to just say something else, Rabbi Goldberg. This is such a zechus and honor, and Rabbi Broide, to be here with both of you. I consider you both friends and colleagues, and I tremendously, tremendously respect you both for the amazing, amazing work you're doing. I have so much to say, and I just blanked. You asked, what was your question?
So let's start with this. Actually, we're going to come back to how you got into outreach. Your brother became a mayor, politics. You went into outreach. Your dad was high profile, represented some famous people. There's a lot to talk to you about, but let's fast forward. Let's begin actually at the end with where we're at. You've dedicated your life, not necessarily always on that trajectory, but you've dedicated your life right now, and your family make great sacrifices. They're moser nefesh. You work hard because you care about the Jewish people. You're doing outreach. Are you moving the needle? Are you making a difference? Assimilation, intermarriage rates skyrocketing. 70% of non-Orthodox are intermarrying. They're leaving the faith. Assimilation, record highs. So with all the incredible work MJE and countless other outreach organizations are doing, are we losing this war, this battle? Are we moving the needle? Are we making headway? And therefore, should we re-examine the resources we have, where they should be directed? What's the state of outreach today?
Okay, so the answer is yes and no. It's a great question, because if you just look objectively at the numbers, 71% of our Jewish brothers and sisters outside of the Orthodox community are intermarrying. And what dent has MGE made in that? Well, somewhat of a dent. We've got 377 couples who have met and married through MGE. But here's the way you need to look at it. And we got to look at our Jewish brothers and sisters from Chabad for a little inspiration. Because if you just look at the objective numbers, you're going to go out of business. Nobody can look at those numbers and be happy. But you turn on one Jew to Yiddishkeit, and I know this sounds very idealistic, but this is the emes. You turn one Jew on to Yiddishkeit, and they choose to raise their children by sending them to Jewish day school and living a life of Torah and mitzvot. What you've done is you've changed the trajectory for the future for that family, and for tens and dozens of others to follow. We got to look. They say you can analyze, success of continuity, not by one, but by two generations. So right now, MJ is 23 years old. We've got a lot of our students having their children's bar bat mitzvahs now. I just came back from Teaneck for Rabbi Shalom Baum's, our good friend Rabbi Baum's Shul of Scholar residency. I brought 30 MG ears. You know who hosted those 30 MG ears? The 11 MGE families who became Bali Tshuva, moved to Teaneck and are living there now.
Beautiful.
And guess what? Each one of them has 2 to 5 kids each. They're all sending them to the Jewish day schools. And that's just going to continue to build and grow and build and grow. So on one hand, yeah, the numbers, I can't argue with the numbers. But on the other hand, one Jew, and I don't know how anyone can just say, oh, the numbers, throw our arms up, let's just make aliyah and forget about the 80% of American Jews that are unaffiliated, or whatever the not crazy number is. When you meet one of those Jews and you see how a life of Torah and mitzvah is so inspirational, not only to them, but to us too, how could you turn your back on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I definitely, your work is incredibly inspiring and effective, right? You just mentioned some metrics and we see its success. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe felt, when asked, how many Jews need to live somewhere for him to send a shliach, his answer was one. If one of your children lived somewhere and needed help, would you not travel for that one child to bring them back? And I'm reminded of that famous rabbinic story of the jellyfish, the boy walking along the beach, and there's millions of jellyfish he's throwing in the ocean. The old cynical man says, what are you doing? Don't you see how many there are? Do you really think it's making a difference? And he picks one up, throws it in the water, and says, it made a difference to that one. So you're right, it makes a difference to that one. But I'll ask you again.
And if you don't mind, and the jellyfish's progeny, children right, and grandchildren.
Great. So what's the cost? So again, I agree with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate for a moment, right? The businessman in me says, what's the cost of capturing that one jellyfish and their progeny? So if we look at how much does MJE, how many do all the outreach organizations combined? What are the salaries? What are the costs? What are the resources going in? And therefore, essentially, how much are we spending for that Jewish marriage, that Jewish Bal Tshuva, for that Jewish continuity? And is that a conscious choice? If we knew that to take a Jew who's not connected and the investment to make them feel connected, and we'll talk in a moment about how we measure success, what is the definition of success, is the amount any amount? Would we say $5 million, whatever it takes to bring one Jew back? How do we look at the finances of outreach?
I wish I had a simple, clear. It's an excellent question. We do spend a lot. It's a Herculean feat to take. It's not as though we're taking a Jew and transforming them. They have to make that decision themselves. They're invested with free will. But the amount of money that it costs to take somebody from a ostensibly secular Jewish existence or lack of Jewish tradition, education, and bring them into our community where they feel comfortable enough to live this kind of life and pass it on to the next generation is very expensive. I don't have an exact number from you, but it's a lot of money. Is it any more money than we're spending on our own children? That's what I'll say. Because what do we spend per capita on each of our children? It's about 400,000 or 500,000 when you finish Jewish day school, 10 years, a year in Eretz Yisrael, 2 years in Israel, NCSY, Kollel. Now they're on a college campus and we got to get the JLESC rabbi to pay attention to them. Okay, take all those numbers. We are not spending per unaffiliated or less affiliated Jews any more money than we would spend on our own children. And they are no different than our children. They are just as much of our brothers and sisters.
Great answer.
That is a great answer. It is a great answer. So how do you define, and Rabbi Broide, I want you to join in on this also because you're also involved in outreach. I'll ask both of you, and we'll see if you have the same answer. But we'll start with you, Rabbi Wildes. How do you define success in outreach? What is a successful outcome?
That's a great question. And I'm curious, Rabbi Broide's response, because I've struggled with this over the years. On one hand, I'm not satisfied with the Lubavitch definition, which is get a Jew to keep a mitzvah, you're good to go. And by the way, there's a lot of support in Kabbalah and Hasidus. If you learn Tanya, I understand why they say this. It's not a concession to a reality, to a difficult reality. They believe it metaphysically. You get a Jew to connect with the Kodesh Baruch Hu through performance of mitzvos. That's it. That's not good enough for me. On the other hand, if you were to define your success only in terms of Shmira Shabbos, Kashrus, Tefillin, Tzitzis, Mezuzah, I think it depends on the Jew. Because there are some Jews who I've met who could really become Talmidei Chachamim. And they could be not only donning tefillin every day and davening 3 times a day, but they could be a posek. They could be just an unbelievable learned Jew. And we, Baruch Hashem, had such successes in MGE. Then there are others who you meet, and it just doesn't seem like they're ever going to become religious. I know that doesn't sound like a very nice thing. We never give up hope. But for that Jew, I want to keep him involved. I want to take intermarriage off the table. And in New York City, most young Jewish professionals date casually, deliberately, intentionally, Jews, non-Jews. It's not even an issue. We have to make it an issue. And by the way, you can make it an issue without having to make them observe it. Okay, just if you create a social milieu around them of Jews and you demonstrate why perpetuating Judaism, even if it's not halachic Judaism, is important, we can get a whole generation to stop dating outside of the faith, because people look at interdating as racist. What, we're better? We've never made the point of why it's worth it to be Jewish. If a person doesn't believe it's worth it to be Jewish, then why do I have to marry Jewish to ensure that my children will be Jewish? There's only one way to ensure or to combat intermarriage, and that's to make a case for Judaism. And therefore, to answer your question, a success would depend on the Jew. For some people, nothing short of Torah mitzvos and becoming a Talmid Chacham, and for others, marrying Jewish.
So, Rabbi Josh, what would you say?
Yeah, so it's funny. I definitely started over there. When we first began, when Rabbi Goldberg was still in the Kollel and we were making this transition into the outreach world, that was definitely the model. Working through Aish and whatever I'd learned from them, and NJOP and all these other local or call it North American outreach organizations. It was kind of find the Jew and then try make them as orthodox or committed as you can. But I also realized that we're living in Boca Raton, which didn't have and doesn't have the same Jewish outreach infrastructure that you have in the Northeast, where there's so many organizations that are working. And other than Chabad right now, that's pretty much it in the local community. We don't have an Aish in our community. We don't have an Or Sameach, and we don't have NJOP. We don't have any of these things. Mm-hmm. But what we do have, we have a lot of great shuls and communities, and figuring out a way maybe where we can create a campaign that activates those people to connect with the people that we're trying to connect them with. And maybe there's that synergy, something we were talking about before the show, mm-hmm. where we can kind of leverage the great things that are taking place in our community and introduce those things to people and help them connect with things that are meaningful to them. So is it just a mitzvah? Maybe. Is it more? Maybe. It could be anything. But they call it the one man or woman show can't really do much more than be the intermediary between the people we're looking to attract. And we know where they are, because Boca is 50% Jewish. Half the community is Jewish. now probably 60,000 Jews, 110,000 unaffiliated. The numbers are crazy. But we don't have the outreach infrastructure, but we do have the Jewish infrastructure.
Totally.
Find people and connect.
And you know what you have, if you don't mind me jumping in, you have the greatest asset and commodity. And that is you have incredible, besides Rabbi Goldberg, you have incredible balabatim. I know tons of people who, and the greatest, Rabbi Riskin, my teacher, said, for the price of a chicken, you can save a Jew. It's the greatest truism in the world, because you don't need a fancy schmancy outreach program with outreach professionals and all this stuff. What you need are Jewish families that invite others to their Shabbos table and care enough to make some room at the table.
Yeah, and they care enough to respond to the unaffiliated Jew or the intimidated, inhibited Jew who bagels them, who says "oi" online at Publix, to turn around and say, "Hi, this is my name. What's your name?" And to realize the number one reason people don't come is because they weren't invited. You think if you invite them, they're going to lash out at you about their feelings about Judaism or Orthodoxy, but they won't. They'd love the invitation if they'd come. But Rabbi Wildes, I want to go back to something that you said in terms of one of the definitions of success or a bar is, and I agree with you, combating intermarriage. What's the argument against intermarriage? You're in Manhattan. You're in the hub of it all. You're in like ground zero for this. And I don't even know. I've struggled. I once begged Lord Sachs, whose whole life in some ways was composing the argument. His books and his talks and his speeches, he was extraordinary. But on the other hand, unless I don't know that he explicitly ever wrote or gave us the manual, gave us the talking points, that when you meet the young person, college campus, young professional, which is your target, and they say, look, I've fallen in love. And the other, I just had this conversation Sunday with the mother of a girl who fell in love with a non-Jewish boy. And the mother says, I'm devastated, I'm broken, but I'm not losing my daughter over it. She knows I'm disappointed. She knows I'm upset, but it kind of is what it is at this point. At least her kids will be Jewish. So you tell that young lady, she met a man and he'd make an amazing husband. He'd make a fantastic father. She sees in him everything she's looking for. You now have half an hour of her time. You have her ear. What's your argument for why it's important not to go through with this? For why it's critical to marry a Jew?
Well, I will tell you that it's a great question. Very little way of very unlikely to convince someone who's already in love. What we have to do is we have to get to people. That's why we focus on 20s and 30s. We have to get to people before they start dating to realize how valuable being Jewish is, and therefore why it's worth perpetuating. That's the argument for marrying Jewish, is that we want Jewish kids because we want more people living this kind of life. If you don't believe in that kind of lifestyle, I'm not sure what kind of argument you can make. The only thing you can do is the following. I'll tell you a story. When my oldest son, who's Bli Ayin Hara now 25, was born, and it was Lenox Hospital. I was looking through the glass plate there. All these cute little babies swaddled up, looked like the United Nations, I remember. And I was looking at my baby, and there's another guy around the same age as me looking at his kid. And he starts becoming visibly emotional until he just starts all out crying. And he was standing right next to me, and he starts repeating, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And he saw my yarmulke, and I was like, what's the matter? You can't believe what? I can't believe my wife wants our baby to be christened. I said, what's going on? He says, I'm Jewish. My wife isn't. We made a deal. We said when we had a kid, we would raise him Jewish. We were just in the room together, and she became so emotional. And all she wants to do is baptize our son. And he literally was crying on my shoulder. You don't hit a guy when he's down. Like, dude, what were you thinking? But I do share this story with people because even if you're not bought in now to Judaism, and I've said this to people dating, you do not know what you're going to feel when that first kid comes along. And you start wondering, or God forbid somebody dies in the family, and all of a sudden you're saying Kaddish and you're wondering, why am I here? What am I leaving this world? Is there any kind of Jewish legacy I'm leaving? And you realize, right? So that resonates with some people. It's an emotional argument. But you never know, because right now I'm in love with this girl, but in 10 years, you might be in love with something else. And it's going to be too late if you don't marry Jewish, or at least consider a conversion, an Orthodox conversion. But I think we've lost the battle at that point with most of them. We have to get to people when they're younger. That's why most Kiruv organizations focus on college, 20s, 30s, because we got to get to them before they start dating.
That's an interesting strategy. I hadn't thought about it in that way. I have the privilege of learning with a previous guest of Behind the Bima, and we were talking about Shavuos coming up, and we have rigorous, robust conversations and debates, a prominent individual, and we were talking about the notion of identity, Jewish identity, and in a certain degree, the identity politics and this emphasis in our time and generation on identity. What defines your identity? Is it your attraction? Is it how you feel? Is it biology? It opens the door for us to have those conversations about what is Jewish identity and where does Jewish identity rank in the hierarchy? Because really what Shavuos, what Matan Torah, what Torah is telling us to do, and he shared with me that his interpretation of Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, is that even in our competing identity as a parent and as a servant of God, in our hierarchy of identities, my identity as a loyal Jew or as a loyal to God has to be the overarching supreme identity that supersedes even an identity as a parent. That's the message of Akedas Yitzchak, a tough message, a difficult one. Wow. But basically, we never want to sacrifice. We don't want to rank or create the hierarchy or priorities of our identities, but maybe there's a conversation opportunity there in a world that's focused on talking about identity. What is your identity? What determines your identity? How do you define identity? Identity politics, intersectionality of identity. Yeah. What is your Jewish identity? Where does that fit in? Where does it come from? What does it mean to you? Where does it rank in conflicts? Are you willing to walk away from it? So you answered one of our other questions, which was, what do you think is the best age to engage when it comes to outreach? Is it middle school, high school? You got NCSY working at that age. What are the advantages or disadvantages of that? You're saying 20s and 30s. Is it college, or maybe on college campus you're partying, or you're distracted by so much more? How did MJE land on the target that it has?
So first of all those ages are important, because I started out with NCSY, and I'm sure Rabbi Broide, you've been involved, in both of you, in helping to makarve a high school kid, and it happens. And it happens on college campus, and it happens 20s, 30s. I just think we got to get to them in enough time before they start choosing their mate. But everybody is different, because some people wake up earlier, some people need to Rabbi Buchwald likes to say that people avenge up. I'll wait for them to sober up after college and come back to New York and get a job, and then I'll run after them a little. I can't deal with them on college campus. Other people think that the age we're dealing with, 23 to 36, is too old. Too much of the of the brain has been developed. We need to get to them while they're still developing. It really depends on the person. Everybody is different. I hate turning away people in their 40s and 50s, because there are Bali Tshuva. I don't know if you've heard of this, Rabbi Akiva. There are people who are 40 years old and up who also become religious, but again, we're trying to deal with the continuity issue, so I'm trying to hit them younger. I think I love 20s and 30s. I love this cohort because they're a little more serious than on college campus. They're well educated, and a lot of them are aware enough to realize that the dichotomy between their secular education and their Jewish education is ridiculous. Like I'm teaching a whole bunch of classes tonight. If I say in my class, is anyone in this room that doesn't have at least a master's degree in some area? Okay. We've got Harvard, Yale, Princeton sitting in the room with a third grade understanding of God and Judaism. And I think people in their 20s are starting to, when they start hearing sophisticated Torah ideas, they're like, oh, I didn't realize that, And this is something I heard from my Rav, Rabbi Grimblat Zichrono Livracha, who years ago said it's the greatest Chilul Hashem that Judaism should appear so infantile and so undeveloped and so unsophisticated. This is one of the reasons he was a big advocate of women education, that as he argued that as women become more in the world, knowledgeable, get master's, doctorates, and so on and so forth, if their knowledge level is left at a third grade, then where are our children going to be? What's their impression of? So I just think there's an element of kiruv that has to be concerned with the dignity of Torah and the way Torah is perceived by the majority of our people, and it's a busha of how of unfortunately the level of knowledge, and the 20s 30s cohort to me just does it for me on a personal level.
That's great. Broide.
Yeah. So first of all, I was wondering about the profile of someone that does work like this, the work that you do, the work that I've begun to do following you. I did some research. I happened to see that you're also a drummer, and that's great. I mean, I think maybe there's something with drums and outreach. I also saw that your wife got you the most incredible birthday present one year.
How do you
love
know?
that
Oh,
We did.
wait, which
I'm
one
talking
are we
about.
talking
I
about?
don't know which. I mean, maybe she got you a lot, but I'm talking about the Liberty, little Liberty
Because
lesson over there.
do you know what the other birthday present was?
No, I don't want. I'm gonna
My
be so jealous. Who?
So first of all, right, Liberty DeVito
DeVito.
came for my 50th. That was amazing. Billy Joel's drummer for 30 years.
I was about to say, do I embarrass myself by saying who's that?
Oh, you don't know Liberty DeVito?
The
I know
greatest.
Billy Joel. I could sing most of his songs, but I don't know Liberty DeVito.
Liberty DeVito.
You were like
took
Liberty.
all-
You know what I thought? I thought she bought you like a policy. Liberty.
Liberty Mutual.
I was like, wow, she bought you a policy for your birthday.
That's really
hopeful.
romantic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
The birthday present I wouldn't say I purchased, but we got for my wife was an hour shiur from Rabbi Goldberg, Rabbi Efrem Goldberg.
Really?
Yeah, my
Wow.
wife is a huge
That I did not know.
fanatic fan of Rabbi Goldberg. His Torah is all over our home, and it's whatever. So that's what I thought you were
Okay,
referring
good.
to. But anyway, go on. I cut you off.
So now you can drop the lawsuit, right? Against Thanks. The question that I'm just wondering, there's not a lot of guys out there that are coming from, call it the more modern world, that are doing outreach. I remember getting a phone call a couple of months ago from a parent saying, my kid is in one of the local yeshivas, and can you speak to them about one of the challenges that they're going through? And they said, and I said, for whatever reason, I said, I'm dealing with all the outreach stuff. This is, call it an in-reach thing. This is, you're already, your kid's plugged in. Why can't you go and speak to the 30 rabbis that are working right now in the schools and in the community that are actually, they're hired to do that. I'm not. I'm hired to work on the outside. There's only one of me. Why do you think it is that in our world, a world which I think can actually be a lot more successful than some of the other worlds for just a number of reasons, right? Because we're kind of in the world. We kind of look like the average guy. Maybe we could be more successful, but there's not a lot of guys going into it.
No, they're not. It's a very astute observation. And when I go, I used to be very involved with AJOP, which is the Association for Jewish Outreach Professionals. Not that everyone in the YU world wears, one of these surugis, but I'm like an anomaly. There's just very few YU trained, modern Orthodox. We don't. I mean, I have a couple of ideas. There is a lack of prestige associated with this kind of work. I think people pay homage to it and respect the people who do it, but don't look at it as a terribly sophisticated kind of thing to be involved in. That's kind of like what you do for a couple of years in NCSY, and then you grow up out of it and you get a stellar, or you become a Rebbe in a Jewish day school. But to like run after young people who are not affiliated, it just seems like not a terribly dignified kind of lifestyle. I'll tell you the other more practical reason. We eat what we hunt.
Right.
And who wants that? There's a lack of stability in the kiruv world. The jobs don't come with homes and big salaries. But I do want to say this, and I know you have a lot of people listening. So there is some money for young rabbis to make, in outreach. It's not a ton of money, but and I think fundraising is a very, very important malacha to learn. And I think it's, I'll just make a quick plug also. I'll come back to your question. Do you know how much money is out there, like philanthropic dollars, that we are not tapping into? And I don't just mean Orthodoxy. I mean Jews, that is going to museums and hospitals, wonderful causes, but not Jewish institutions because they're not engaged Jewishly. Okay, if somebody would just, going back to Rabbi Goldberg, your question before, if we were to think, philanthropically, a little more strategically, we would realize that we should be more invested because there's tons of money out there that is untapped. But getting back to your question, Rabbi Broide, I think we need to rebrand kiruv, because the best and the brightest, no offense to you or me, okay, I'll put you in the same category with me, the best and the brightest are not going into this. They're becoming Rabbi Efrem Goldbergs, rabbis of wonderful, and that's amazing, and we need them because, we wouldn't have the infrastructure. You wouldn't have your gig, and I wouldn't have people to run after, and everything, my 30 people being, integrated into TNEC and into Great Neck and into Boca, and we wouldn't have anything then. but we need more, in my opinion. I don't know what the term is. People don't love this term. Rabbi Goldberg, I've heard you speak about this also. For the lack of a better term, modern Orthodox centrist types of Rabbanim going into this work. Because our Torah Umada, our belief in Torah Umada is incredibly attractive. And we're not just doing it for the sake of a parnasa or to be impressive to other people, but if you follow, let's say, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zechat Tzak Levracha, about in English literature, or Rabbi Tendler, Zechat Tzak Levracha, in biology, and finding the beauty in Mada, and that is informing your relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Lechatchila, religious Zionism. Like, these are attractive aspects to our community that don't exist as much or at all in the Haredi world. And yet they are the ones on the forefront. And by the way, God bless them, because they are lifting, they are doing the heavy lifting. Okay, and those are my colleagues.
You hit on something very important. You hit on something important, which, the term I would use is Mesiras Nefesh. You have to be Moser Nefesh. It requires tremendous sacrifice, a willingness to sacrifice, because the other career paths, you both referenced this, the other career paths are laid out before you, right? You become a teacher, you become an administrator, you can try to climb, become a head of school, you become an assistant, rabbinic intern, an assistant rabbi, you become the rabbi, but you want to go into outreach. You basically have the burden of every Chabad, which is, like you said, you eat what you kill. Like, there's no board, there's no budget, right. There's no revenue that comes in, there's no automatic, you're always in raising money phase. You're always in that approach. And I think for a lot of people, they have the talent or the charisma, they would step in if somebody else is doing that work to create the infrastructure and enable them to thrive with their talents. But a lot of people are scared, and not only they're scared, they've heard from their parents, like, you need to have a real job, you need to have a real salary, you need to have real benefits, you need to have something real. What are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go to some undeveloped area of Jewish life and beg people for money to pay for my salary so I could turn them on to Judaism. That scares a lot of parents. It scares a lot of young people. And they say, we're living in a time right now of inflation and cost increases, and it's a very, very scary time. So I wonder if the community invested funds to create the infrastructure that the talented people could be put into. It doesn't mean they won't have obligations in fundraising. I'm a Rav of a shul, and I have enormous fundraising responsibilities. I've taken them on myself, or they've been imposed, whatever it is. But not to suggest somebody doesn't have any fundraising, but maybe we need to build it so that they will come.
100%. Look, either we have to change the attitude, like Chabad, because they're vying for these professions and nobody's throwing any money at them. They're just willing to do it. If we can't affect that kind of attitudinal change, then I guess we have to do what you just suggested, which is create more of an infrastructure that will still require the fundraising, the outreach professional to fundraise, but it won't be this Herculean feat of where it's keeping people from coming in. And it's a problem, because the number one problem I have to this day is not money. It's finding the right people. Now, some of that is a function of money, but finding the right people, because that if you get a superstar, it's it. You get a Shvacha Maisa, it's not so. Now, and you could train, that's it. You could train and you could develop, and we've been doing that. And I've been blessed with incredible people. Listen, I want to give a lot of Akar Satov to my parents, my father. He should live and be well, because I did go the route. I went to law school, I worked within law, and he continued to support. And it's easy for me to look down at other people and say, why don't you do the same thing? But I had a very supportive family that was willing to do this. And I had also some inroads in the modern Orthodox community. I was a Rabbi KJ, I was a Rabbi Ozi. I already had some connections. It's not simple for the typical YU Musmach to just jump into this. But if we don't change either attitudinally and give it the prestige that Chabad does, or we don't pump in that cash, then we are not going to make the impact that we can.
I want to give you the counter argument now, and then I want to go back, because we're already deep into this amazing conversation. We have not even yet spoken about your own story and your journey and how you got here. But I want to give you the counter argument for a minute, with respect and with love. What would you say to someone who says, we shouldn't build the infrastructure and pump money in to the outreach? It's important. But in any business model, there's a cost of acquiring new customers, and then there's customer retention. They're saying who's already bought in, who we need to keep, because you don't just add new customers, shul membership too. You want new members, but how do you keep your members happy that they don't leave? So in-reach versus outreach, we've got a system that we're losing. We're losing way too many. And, I hate the terminologies and labels and being put in a box as much as anyone. I feel a member of multiple worlds. Every world is suffering from this, maybe segments of the world more than others, but people who are turned off, people who are disaffected, people who are walking away. So should we put the same dollar into outreach or put that dollar into inreach? Do we take our greatest talent and say, go 20s and 30s before they get married, convince them Jewish identity matters? Or do we put that talent and say, we've got kids who we've already put $500,000, $750,000 into through Jewish day school, and they're graduating 12th grade, they're going to some secular campus. This is a study that's been done. I won't say by whom. They're afraid to publish it because of how frightening the results are. What's happening to kids from Orthodox home who are going to secular college campuses and walking away from observance, in some cases at best, and even intermarriage at worst. So what are we doing? We've got to pump all the money and all the talent into inreach, into retention, into strengthening our existing observant Orthodox community. That's what we need to be working on. What would you answer them?
Oh, God. Look, you can argue either way. You can argue, and you just made a very powerful argument. Let's put more money. 12 years of day school, 2 years in Israel, NCSY Kollel, more. I'm not so sure more money will make the difference. I think we need to change certain things, and that's for a longer conversation. I think our curriculum in Jewish day schools need to be changed. They're not, in my opinion, hashkafic enough, and they're not, and I know your Rebbe, Moshe Weinberger, I think a lot more of that approach needs to be woven into the very fabric of yeshiva day school education. And until we realize that maybe 20% of our yeshiva day school students are really with the Gemara game, I'm not saying we ditch it, God forbid, it's the staple, but it's not working for so many of them. And I think that's not a money difference. It's college. You have to make changes. We're still operating with the same kind of curriculum, and I think our shuls need to change in terms of the way we daven. Our davening and needs to be inspirational. Again, I'll point to Rabbi Moshe Weinberger when I go to Eish Kodesh. It's just like I model MGE after Eish Kodesh because that's a shul people continue to flock to for all the right reasons. And we have to change our shuls, and we're still not doing it. We talk about it a lot, but we're not doing it yet. So I don't think throwing more money is necessarily the answer. And I will tell you the other answer from a very just purely Torah perspective. We are not given the luxury of answering this question from a purely business perspective. The Torah commands that we have to go out and try to inspire our brothers and sisters in the ways of Torah Judaism. It didn't say, there's no Rashi, there's no qualification there, except if it costs too much money. Or now it's going to come at the expense of some Fruma Yid who we could keep on the path if we threw an extra few dollars. I mean, and I argued this in Jewish Action. I wrote an article in response to my Rebbe, our Rebbe, Rabbi Jacob J. Schachter, who was arguing that we should be putting more money into the Orthodox to keep them Orthodox. And I said, I respectfully disagree. We are putting a crazy amount of money. Listen, when I grew up, okay, I didn't grow up as Orthodox as the typical modern Orthodox kid, okay? And we just have to recognize the world has changed, and many more people are being affected by the outside world through the internet and so on and so forth. I don't think those problems are solved with money. I think we have to have an attitudinal change in the way we raise our children and day school education. And here's the clincher. I'll stop talking. We have to leverage kiruv, and this is what Rabbi Mark Wildes has taught for many, many years. We have to leverage kiruv to turn on modern Orthodox Jews. Blian have 4 kids who are very excited about Yiddishkeit, and I give their mother a lot of credit, number one. And number two, the fact that they grew up with 18 to 20 beginners around their Shabbos table every week. If you introduce your kids at a young age to beginners to Judaism who are coming back to Yiddishkeit and who are choosing to keep Shabbos, choosing to observe kashrut, and having a hard time giving up shrimp and lobster, and are doing it because they see the value in it, that's a game changer for a Jewish day school kid who's rolling his eyes and waiting to get out, to do whatever they want to do. And I just think if we mainstream kiruv, we get kiruv in every Jewish household, it becomes part of the education of our own children, we will do a lot better. And we won't have to make that decision of where do we put the money, because we'll put it in kiruv, but it's going to work for our kids.
You You were on the path to be a lawyer, as you mentioned. You were a lawyer, and John Lennon changed your life indirectly. How's that for a segue? No, in all seriousness, you have a brother who was the mayor of Englewood. Your dad accomplished, and you should be well representing high-profile people. You were on the path of corporate America or legal America. Maybe you would have been representing Johnny Depp or something today. Who knows, in the courtroom. So, and something changed. What changed in you? When did that happen? Why did it happen? How did it happen? How did you give your life to outreach instead?
So it actually started with NCSY. Rabbi Broide mentioned I was a drummer. I am a drummer, and the only gigs, the band, you want to hear a great name for a band? Tohu Vavohu, Chaos and Disorder. That was the first band I was in.
Who'd you play with? Who was some of the guys?
Oh, God. Mo Shapiro, Mark Wexler, call him Sexy Wexy. We had a whole group. And one of the things that they used to do with NCSY bands was keep them as far away from the kids as possible. And I was in that band, and like the band and the kids would never, and I would sit in once in a while in shul. They would take out a bunch of kids from shul, like, on the Shabbatons, bring them into some like shul coat room. It was always in a coat room for some reason. And like there'll be a dozen kids, and somebody would give like a little talk about tefillah. And I would always listen, and I'll be like, that was pretty good. I thought I could do a little better, but I was the slimy drummer in the band. I was like the guy you would not, not because of me. That's just that was the culture of the NCSY with the bands. I think they cleaned that up years ago. Okay, so there was one guy, Mark Cohen, who I'll never forget, and Mark Cohen was the head of Central East NCSY, and he comes over to me in shul, and he says, "I want you to teach the kids in the coat room." I said, "What do you want me to teach the kids what?" He goes, "Talk to them about tefillah." I said, "I didn't prepare anything." He said, "I don't care. Just talk to them about tefillah. Go in the coat room." And then I was like, okay. I went with like a dozen kids into a coat room. And we talked about what it means to daven, to pray. I was in YU at the time. I was in college. And then the next time he put me up in front of a shul. We were in Columbus, Ohio. And he just literally gave me 5 minutes. He said, "Talk. I want you to say something." And he just kept sticking me up there. And not only when I was behind the drum set, and I started to feel like this is resonating with me. And when I was in Smicha in YU, which I only really went to learn because my Rebbe, Yeshiva University, Rav Parnas, I loved Rav Parnas, and I was in a shir, and I didn't want to leave the shir. YU didn't let you just float around. So I did the Chavra program to stay in the shir for another year. And then the only thing left was smicha. I had no interest in being a rabbi. I was already in law school. I was also enrolled in a master's degree in Columbia in international affairs. I was going to save Soviet Jews. I was going to go into my father's firm, immigration, international law. I worked for Senator Moynihan, Congressman Gary Ackerman. I had a whole thing going. But then I started a beginner service, just like you run, Rabbi Broide, a beginner service in the Queens Jewish Center to just be Yotze my internship requirement for YU. I wasn't going to do it, but they said, "You got this far in Smicha, just do it." And I started a beginner's minyan. And I remember I plastered 108th Street, Yellowstone Boulevard, Queens Boulevard in my neighborhood with flyers. I called this guy, Efrem on the phone. This is 1991. Okay. And I said, "I'm going to start a beginner's minyan. I have no idea who's going to come." 8 Jews showed up. I can tell you all their names. 8 Jews showed up, and I just got bitten. And everything I was doing in the law, international affairs, I finished my law degree. I worked for a couple of firms. It was just, it was fine. But this was like amazing. This was like, I just got bit, and I just wanted to do it more and more. And I just figured the Jewish world could probably do without one more Jewish attorney. But maybe if we could grab hold to, and I want to give credit to my Rebbe, Rabbi Joseph Grunblatt, who was the rabbi of my shul, Zichrono Livracha, who was a big Talmid Chacham and a big Baal Machshava. He had a big influence on me, and he mentored me for those few years. And then I got a call from out of the blue from this Rabbi Schachter, who called and asked if I would teach a class at the Jewish Center. This is now 1995. For non-Jewish Center members. and he would pay me to teach like a basic Judaism class at the Jewish Center. I met my wife, by the way, in that class. I did not date her while she was in the class. I want to make that clear for the record. By the way,
be a great story if you did. It's okay. It's not like it was high school.
I asked my Rebbe one of my Rebbeim at the time, I was like, what do you think? He's like, that's a little beneath industry standard.
That's funny.
How many classes is a semester? I said, it's 8 classes. We're ready 3 or 4. He goes, so wait for the semester over and then ask her out. She was already becoming observant. So I waited, and like a schnook for the last class, I advertised I'm doing another semester, which she, of course, signed up for. And she started dating my best friend, and that was another 8 weeks. I couldn't do anything. Anyway, that's a whole other story. But that's my trajectory, basically. I got bit. And I would say to anyone who really enjoys presenting Judaism and engaging with Jews who are smart, motivated, just not terribly learned or knowledgeable. There's something that those of us from a little more of a learned, knowledgeable background, we can gain so much by being engaged with this literally majority of our people that are disconnected.
Go ahead, Rabbi Broide.
Yeah, I'm just listening to this. This is great.
I have so many more questions. First of all, where does John Lennon fit in?
Oh, God. So I'm an obsessive Beatles fan. So my dad represented John for 5 years. I met him on my 9th birthday in court. He wished me a happy birthday and told me that I could have my father back now because my dad was basically focused on that case for almost 5 years.
Wow. Do you ever get to play with him? You ever get to sit in on the drums?
I was a kid, but I'm obsessed with all of his music. I had a great deal. I actually gave a drasha on this past Rosh Hashanah about Imagine, which if you know the lyrics for Imagine aren't exactly along the lines with our outlook on Judaism. I think he was a highly misunderstood personality, but very, very gifted artist who cared deeply about society and the way things were going and tried to use, his popularity to shift things in a way that he thought was appropriate. Not all of which we might agree with, but I think generally speaking, a very, very positive way, minus the drug, sex, and rock and roll. Well, not the rock and roll.
I'm listening to our whole conversation and fantastic insight and I'm getting a lot. I'm sure our listeners are too. And I'm really curious the feedback for one particular listener. There's a woman who's a member of the greater Jewish community. She's not observant. She's not Orthodox, but she's a big, Rabbi Broide fan, Rabbi Moskowitz fan. So she listens to Behind the Bima. And often we get an email and we've even met with her and she gave us some feedback because she's tried to have us pivot to direct and to remember that the whole world is not Orthodox or observant, doesn't know our lingo and so on. I think we've been fairly careful with that in this conversation to make it accessible and available to anyone to listen to. But I'm wondering when she hears our conversation about outreach. We've got to turn on Jews. We've got to inspire Jews. We've got to educate Jews. We've got to bring Jews to where we are. I know the Lubavitcher Rebbe, for example, was opposed to calling it kiruv because kiruv means I've arrived and let me bring you closer to where I am. You're far away. I'm where you're meant to be. Let me bring you close. He was opposed to that. So I'm just wondering, will she listen to this and say, wow, this is amazing. 3 rabbis talking about the future of the Jewish people, caring, connecting, inspiring, lifting? Or will she say, they think they've arrived, they have the only brand, that everyone has to be like them, transform, convert, observe, practice? Is it, I don't mean you, Rabbi Wildes, I'm talking to myself. Is it condescending or insulting to the unaffiliated, non-observant who hears? Or do they say, wow, this is a whole conversation about caring about me, inviting me, remembering I'm not invisible and finding me? So how do you strike that balance in the outreach world between I love you and I care about you and I'm sharing something special I value with you versus, I've arrived, I'm observant, I'm lucky, I was born into it. You poor intellectual peasant who don't know anything, let me reach out. I'm curious your feedback. I hate people in the outreach world when they talk about how many Balei Tshuvas they made. Not one person in particular who talks about that, but and there's a lot of things I don't like about that person. But there are people who talk about I made Balei Tshuva, I made millions, I made hundreds of thousands, I made thousands of Balei Tshuva. That language, I made a Baal Tshuva. you would never use that language.
I
You
would never use
wanna-
language. First of all, it's not true. It's anybody who's really well acquainted with outreach in Kirov knows that we are at best facilitators. People have to make a choice. We can't do that for them. Okay. And I also, going back to your question before, why are there not enough motivated, talented modern Orthodox rabbis? I think, Rabbi Goldberg, one of the reasons people shy away from Kirov is because of that perception. It smacks of a certain chauvinistic, we're here and you're over there. Okay. We have to be able to articulate that we are doing outreach for two reasons. We love Torah. We believe in Torah. That's one reason. And we love you. No different than going to a movie that you love, that you think is incredible, and then you go home and you say nothing to your wife about the amazing movie you just saw. That either you didn't like the film or you don't care terribly about your wife. If you love the film and you love your wife, you're going to try to marry the two together. That is it. And I think at the end of the day, people are excited about that. They're not put off by that. They are put off, as you very aptly put it, by any kind of sense of I'm here and you're here. This condescension of like, I have absolute monopoly on truth, and all you have to do is plug in what I'm saying and you'll be as happy, as fulfilled, and as connected to God as I am. We're all on a journey, and I don't just say that. I know that sounds, I really believe we're on a journey. And I also believe that engaging with people that are less connected is part of our avodas Hashem, not only because of the obligation to reach out, but also because of the people we meet challenge us in a way that other Orthodox Jews do not. We need them to be the best Jewish selves ourselves. And I think if we can communicate that, because I am a little concerned with the direction the more modern part of the modern Orthodox community is very put off by they don't like to use the word Kirov. It's engagement. And I'm like, why? Kirov just means getting closer. We're trying to help other people get closer to Yiddish, just like you and I are trying to get closer to Yiddishkeit. We have the benefit of a day school or whatever kind of Jewish education, so we can share things other people don't know. That's all it is. It's not implying I'm better, but it is saying something about this information, about this thing called the Torah. But when was the last time we were shy about saying how awesome Torah was? So I think
you know the story.
Yeah.
You probably used the story about the young man who the Ger Rebbe ran into in Yerushalayim, and he said, "Where are you learning?" So he named whatever yeshiva. It was a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. So he told him the name of the yeshiva. He said, "But I'm not a Baal Tshuva."
Right.
And the Rebbe looked at him and said, "Farvos nicht." And why not? Why aren't you a Baal Tshuva?
Farvos nicht.
Yeah.
Rabbi
So
Fran.
yeah. So exactly. So that's it. Kirov. We're trying to do Kirov on ourselves. Why should we apologize for sharing it more broadly than that too? We can't allow this conversation to go by without mentioning my dear friend Ezra Cohen, Rabbi Ezra Cohen, one of your great assets, Manhattan Jewish Experience, MJE. So I remember he ran a program.
He's an amazing example of talent who devoted. He's been with us for 20 years now.
Wow.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
20 years. No, he is a talent. He is great and a good friend. I remember him sharing with me a great program that you led, MJE in Manhattan. Fiddler on the Roof, that you showed Fiddler on the Roof, on the roof. So tell our listeners, let's try to close out. What are some of the creative programs? How do you engage 20 and 30 professionals? They could be at a bar, at a club. They could be, professional networking. They could be at home with direct TV. What kind of programs do you run? What are some of the creative? I've seen some of your great videos.
The Rocky video.
Yeah, the videos.
That was the greatest.
I love that you love my Rocky video because I take a lot of pride in that.
No, but every scene was perfect. Like I know Rocky. I know when you wiped your mouth with the egg. I know that scene.
By the way, the egg kept gelling up in the shell when I was trying to fake drink it because I would never. It was orange juice with a little water. You know what? Number one, powerful experience, and the whole outreach world realized this years ago and is bringing Jews to Israel. Number one, Israel. There's just something, anything you do in the diaspora, I hate to say it, anything you do in the diaspora smacks a little of talking about Judaism as opposed to feeling it itself. So Israel is just high, ranks very, very high. I think music, I think also marrying whatever Torah with what's contemporary. My son is very into meditation and music, and he does these musical meditations. It's really catching on now. A lot of young people are getting into and already into meditation. If we can demonstrate how Judaism and through tefillah has is into this, and this is a path into Torah, into Yiddishkeit, Shabbos has never been easier to sell. In the 25 years I've been doing Kiruv, outreach, whatever you want to call it, Shabbos, this detox to put the phone down. Years ago I sounded like old fashioned. Now I'm like sounding progressive because everybody's looking to sort of chill out from the craziness of technology. I'm not giving you the coolest, craziest things. I mean, I would say Israel, Shabbos dinners, classes, social events, ski retreat. We've been doing ski retreats for a long time. I love them because you marry skiing with Judaism. And if you could take like the jacket off and just like chill out on the slopes and literally teach a class on a ski slope or at a lodge around a fire, it just brings everything down. Our guard is down, their guard is down. We're looking at each other, we're talking, we're connecting. Shabbos meals, I want to say it again before we finish here. As many of your Balabatim, Rabbi Goldberg, Rabbi Broide, that we can inspire to invite to a Shabbos meal, because the fanciest, most sophisticated and expensive videos and programs will never compete with the beauty of a family sitting down to have a Shabbos meal. And that was Rabbi Noach Weinberg, Zichron Livracha's, mentioned it before, awake the sleeping giant. Who's the sleeping giant? It's not the Kiruv professionals, it's not the rabbis. It's the typical Joe Jew keeping Shabbos, living a life of Torah and mitzvot. How can we bring everyone into this? That's how we're going to affect the masses.
Rabbi Mark Wildes, founder, director, MJE. You are 100% right. There are enough Jewish lawyers out there, but what would the world look like? In case any of our listeners wonder, is Rabbi Wildes really in Manhattan? Does he really live in Manhattan? Does he work in Manhattan? Are we faking it?
Sound effects.
There were sirens the entire interview. So he is definitely in Manhattan. He's not in some studio. It's not a fake background. He is not only in Manhattan, he is transforming Manhattan. Rabbi Wildes, thank you for giving your time. Thank you for
my honor and pleasure. And
thank you for being a pioneer. Thank you for being out front,
Really?
being Moser Nefesh for this, because, from our community, our chevra, you are a pioneer in doing this. You've paved the way. You're doing it with tremendous success. You've hired lots of people and got them started on their career in this way. So you've made a huge, huge difference. And Jewish people are much richer for it. Thank you.
And we will keep copying you.
Well, I hope other shuls will copy you, because you said at the beginning, how many shuls have an outreach director on staff? Not a lot. It takes a real commitment. You've made that commitment, Rabbi Goldberg, and you've had a colleague for many years who's awesomely talented, and you should both go Mechayel L'Chayel.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much.
Wow.
Great interview. Talk to me, Rabbi Broide. What struck you about that conversation, that interview? What's your takeaway?
Well, first of all, I just got an email. NCSY mourns the passing of Rabbi Pinchas Stopler, who was a pioneer, a trailblazer in the world of outreach, and unfortunately just saw that he passed away. So we mentioned NCSY a number of times tonight.
Yes, the world of outreach is set back. I'll tell you a story. First of all, our fact checker did correct me. They were not jellyfish, they were starfish. The story of throwing one back in, it mattered to them. Starfish,
I don't know how you could throw back a jellyfish, because
I noticed you didn't correct
me. Jello.
I'm
never gonna correct you. No, let me
where were you?
Let me tell you the rule. I am a supporter. I don't challenge anything. I go along with, I support my brother. Whatever he says, I go along with.
Listen to the story about Rabbi Stolper. Rabbi Pinchas Stolper, NCSY, pioneer of Kiruv. So on Wikipedia, listen to the story it has. Stolper attended Yeshiva Chaim Berlin due to an interesting sequence of events. A few short years after the Holocaust, then mayor of New York, Vincent Impellitteri, invited a German soccer team to City Hall and honored them with a reception. The pain of the Holocaust still fresh, Stolper felt it his duty to stand up and protest what he considered a serious affront to the memories of 6 million. He and 12 other people gathered to distribute leaflets and throw rotten tomatoes at the mayor, his entourage, and the German soccer team. The reception was ruined and Stolper was arrested. Stolper's picture was splashed on the front cover of the Daily Mirror, as well as many other papers. Following day, Rav Hutner was eating breakfast with Rav Chaim Feuerman and was perusing a copy of the Daily Mirror. Rav Hutner pointed to the picture of the then 18-year-old Pinchas Stolper and said, "This young man has chutzpah. We need him in our yeshiva." From that event, Stolper was enrolled in Yeshiva Chaim Berlin and became one of the central Talmidim of Rav Hutner, dedicating his life to disseminating Rav Hutner's Torah to the world. Wow. Isn't that a great story?
I love stories like that. I love that.
Great story.
But you asked me what did I think about that interview. You at the beginning of the interview, there was some point where Rabbi Wildes said how he's got 300 plus shidduchim that have come about because of what he's done, and you asked him for statistics, how many have he, has he made a dent? And you start thinking about it. It came up Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva ended up losing 24,000 talmidim, 24,000 students, and now he has 5 more. 5 more becomes the future of the Jewish world.
Right.
So you never know. You don't talk about numbers. Don't worry about numbers. We got to do our job.
It's true. I hear that.
Do our job. Do as much as we can.
Yeah.
It's all in the hands of Hashem anyway.
Well, that conversation I became pumped about behind the Bima again because I
know we're back.
I hope it's a place that there's meaningful conversation. It's not
Right.
only entertaining or interesting, but it's meaningful. It challenges you to think and leave your comfort zone. And I think we had such a conversation. I hope everybody is moved to listen to this challenge Rabbi Wildes put out there, which is invite people to your Shabbos table, open up
Right.
your home, be part of the difference.
Don't be
yourself to
afraid.
Inspire others.
They want to meet you. They're not
Right.
going to scream at you, and they're not going to yell at you. They can't wait to see you.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll say my favorite part of the interview, I'm curious whether any of those watching saw it, was the fly that kept landing on my nose.
It's going to end up, someone's going to grab it. It's going to
be a meme or a GIF
meme,
or whatever
right.
those things are
It's
called.
going to be somewhere.
I don't
right.
know. This fly has been following me for like 3 days. It's in my office. It's been coming to every shear I give, and it
I
just
love it.
buzzes and sits on the mic and lands on my nose. It's
The
a Gilgul.
forehead.
It's got to be a reincarnation of
Who could it
something,
be?
someone.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why it's but this fly
But
is
you-
just following,
when-
tracking me.
When you mentioned that Shabbaton you're just at with 600 energized college students, you just imagine like maybe we're not giving them a platform in our own communities. Maybe they are working with teenagers and they're doing the thing with NCSY, but give them more opportunities. If they're here,
would light them
if
on
they
fire.
belong to your shul, let them light up our shuls. Let them
Right.
do it. Let's pay them
Right.
something. Let's give them something. And
I think
rock.
we got to challenge them. I don't know if they're going to knock on our door on their own, but we can actually look for leaders, try to find
Right.
those qualities, and try to, teach them and lead them and seed the community and the Jewish future with the people. Plant a
Right.
seed in ideas that this is a career. It can be a beautiful thing. But I really think the takeaway from tonight, you're an outreach professional. Rabbi Wildes is an outreach professional. I'm a Jewish professional. But the takeaway from tonight is not about us or we professionals. It's about you. It's about lay people,
Exactly.
about volunteers. It's about the doctor and the lawyer. The biggest impact on outreach, and this is true in our community too, with all that you and Simone do, but it's the doctor and the lawyer and the accountant,
Yeah.
the business person. It's the stay-at-home mom or the dad or retiree who has that relationship, who learns, who fills in a class, who's not getting paid for it. It's not a career out of it,
Right.
but who cares about it. That's
I'm telling you, we could change the world. One man, one woman, learning Torah with one man and one woman. That's it. That could change everything. It's what we have 800,000 Jews.
I had a
that are
meeting. I
Torah
had a
Jews.
meeting
We
last
can-
week with a beloved new member, and
Yeah.
I won't say his name. I don't want to embarrass him, but he moved in a year ago, and he called the shul because he needed a mezuzah, and he didn't
Yeah.
know who to call, and someone said call BRS. As a result, I think we give those calls to you. You spoke to him. You invited him.
Oh, Paul?
Yeah, we're not saying who. And
Okay.
he's been coming every Shabbos since.
Every
And
Shabbos.
he met with me last week, and literally with a tear coming out of his eye, he said, "I've never had a Rebbe. Will you be my Rebbe?" It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And he's here, he's engaged, and he loves it, and he's found a community,
Can't I
and a
say-
home.
Can't I
All
say
because
great?
he called because he needed a mezuzah. He wasn't
Mezuzah, yeah.
observant.
Yeah.
And now he found, I want to tell you also, I'll tell you the story he told me. And then it's getting late. But I'll tell you the story. There's a live show, by the way. Live. Anyone who challenges that? Live. It's late. What do you want to know? Score in the Heat game, the Yankee game? It's a live show. I could prove to you that it's live.
57-51. We're down 6 points.
I could prove. There you go. Evidence that we don't have sirens here in South Florida, but we do have the Heat.
Right.
playing in the
AJ's
playoff.
watching the Heat game. So
So he said, he hasn't known what to come to. He's intimidated. He's not observant. This isn't his world. It's not his background. He said to me, he goes, whenever you give an example that our shul is such diversity, you could have a guy in a shtreimel sitting next to a guy who drove to shul. He's like, how do you know? You're talking about me. I'm that guy. I'm the guy who
he's the
drove.
guy.
Anyway, so we advertised and marketed. We had a beautiful night with Rav Moshe Weinberger, and we partner with Nachi Gordon, Meaningful Minute people, and Inspiration, whatever. And we streamed it for the world, and it was a great event. You remember that Fabrengen? She was packed, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. It was packed. We had live music. It was an amazing night.
Amazing
Right?
night.
So that friend of ours, you may have mentioned his name. he came to it. He wasn't sure, should he come, not come, not in his comfort zone, not in his experience, but he came and he sat in the back, kind of, watching part of it, but on the border of it, on the margins of it. And if you remember, Weinberger that night spoke all about the people in the back.
Yeah.
Not giving up on the Jews in the back, caring about the people in the back, future of Judaism of the people in the back.
I would have been in the back.
He finished speaking and the music started playing. And, everybody on the Bima, you lock arms and you're dancing and you got the candles and you're rocking and rolling. And then all of a sudden, Weinberger realized, I just spoke about the people in the back. Do you remember this? He came down from the Bima.
He ran to the back.
He ran to the back.
Right.
So our friend told me, he goes, he ran to the back and he held my hand. I wasn't sure if I should come that night. And the next thing you know, I'm holding hands and dancing with Moshe Weinberger. So these little moments, like,
can I tell you something amazing? Part 2 of that story. I just got a message from Talia, right? Not many shuls have an engagement director, right? Membership engagement. There's someone new that had contacted me that's moving to the community. Also, call it a beginner, right? Someone that's looking to come to our community and really wants to begin their journey. So she reached out to him today, and she's like, "I'm telling that guy that you were just talking about to connect with him to let him know how easy the entry can be."
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you again to our dear friends, the Strausses, for sponsoring. Thank you to Itzi Predator, who did not want to sponsor. It's possible that Seth Grossman's been texting me the entire night that he wants to come to shul or come on or be interviewed, and we're not allowing that. He's going to have to pay to play, baby.
Just pay the $500 or whatever it is.
No, it's less than that. It's a bargain. It's a discount. Pay to play. No problem. He could be on again.
I would love to see him.
Seth wants back on. And to hear the 2 Seth Grossman stories from Rabbi Broide.
I got 2 very special. Let me just tell you.
No.
I can't even give you. Can I give you a little teaser?
No, not yet.
A little teaser. I'm not going to tell you what happened. Let's just say that I wasn't married to Simone, and I wanted to hang out with her for Shabbos. Seth enabled it to happen somehow. I got to tell you how it happened.
Okay. Well, we're not giving him that satisfaction. But anyway, sign up for the 1-on-1. Please could make an enormous difference. Give $1 a day and learn a minute a day, partnering with Daily Giving. For Esti Moskowitz, she should have a full shleima. Esther Tehila Bas Ariel Tzipora. brsonline.org/1-on-1. brsonline.org/1 1-on-1. Sign up to do both. Great merit for her. Please God, we should hear great things. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back and we're better than ever. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay holy.